Meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. My name is Nelisa Council, and I'll be chairing the meeting today in absence of the chairman. This meeting is fully in person, so all committee members are asked to be present in the Metro Plan Orlando boardroom. We still have virtual participation for the public. I'll ask all committee members to please speak clearly, use their microphones, so those joining us virtually can hear us. Now it's time for the Pledge of Allegiance. Today I will ask Brian Coleman to lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. There are two public comment points in the meeting. Members of the public who are here in person and want to make a comment should submit a speaker card to Ms. Rachel Frederick. Those attending on the Zoom who want to speak can use the raise hand feature on the Zoom screen. At the February Metro Plan Board meeting, our chair, Dan Stevens, informed the board of our leadership change, our 2024, and shared some of our comments on last month's action items and presentations. We have a very, very full agenda today, so I hope that we can move through it as efficiently as possible. Remember that if you have any questions that don't get answered during the meeting, Ms. Horn will follow up with the presenters and get those answered. And that, I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Marianne Horn of the Metro Plan Orlando staff, who will be doing the agenda review.
Thank you, Vice Chair Council. Thanks all committee members, all those attending both in the room and online. We're very glad you're here. We currently need a quorum of 14 members, which I believe we have in the room to conduct votes. As always, it's very important to RSVP for the meetings with Rachel so that we can prepare. There are still Zoom and YouTube options available for the public. In January, we recruited people for the Metro Plan Orlando board-appointed seats on this committee, and we had more than 40 applicants. We had 4 seats available, 40 applicants. Our selection committee had their work cut out for them. They met on February 14th, went through these and chose 4 names to submit to the Metro Plan Orlando board for approval. You have a fact sheet among your information items that has those names on it. We will bring this before the board in March for approval and hope to bring the new members in here in April. And this year, I'll be giving you more information. We're going to have their orientation here in the boardroom, and we would invite any other members to join us before the regular meeting for that. We'll give you details in the future, because a lot of the orientation material you may wish to revisit, or be here to, talk to the new members and perhaps explain to them a little bit how you have internalized some of these things as well. So, at the same time that we have filled these seats, we are still waiting to fill some of our jurisdiction appointed seats. We are working with 2 of our counties on that. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Mr. Mike Wilson, who's going to give us the safety moment.
Thank you, Marianne. Good morning, everyone. March is Florida Bicycle Month. Like Florida, we tend to do things different here, right? So it's May in the rest of the country, but here it's maybe getting a little too hot in May. So to talk about bicyclists and safety, looking at the past 5 years, the years that we're using for our Vision Zero plan, we had an average of 728 reported bicyclist crashes per year over those years. This year we are over 830, a significant increase in that. an average of about 67 serious injury crashes. It should also be noted that there are about 115 bicyclist hospitalizations each year that do not involve a motor vehicle. So those don't get a crash report. We hear about that through the injury reporting system. And then we have an average of about 14 fatalities per year. Once again, we're way up this year for 2023 with 22 such fatalities. And we also occasionally have some fatalities that do not involve a motor vehicle. You hit your head on the pavement without a helmet, and there's always that risk. So to talk about what are the key things that bicyclists can do to reduce their risk, well, the top one is actually to go with the flow. And that's true whether you are riding on the roadway, a bike lane, or even on the sidewalk or a path. We know from our research that facing traffic on the left side of the road increases your risk 5-fold compared to going with the flow. And this photograph kind of illustrates why. See, look at this driver pulling out of a driveway. And where is she looking? Well, she's looking where all those motor vehicles are coming from on the roadway. And so this by far is the most common type of crash that we have. It tends not to be on average very serious, but because there are so many of them, they account for 30% of our serious and fatal injuries in our area. Not a whole lot of fatalities, but a significant number of fatal injuries. Compare that to overtaking crashes where a motorist hits a cyclist from behind. Those are only 10% of our KSIs. So about one crash per day in our area is of this type. And about once every couple of weeks, there is a fatal or a serious or fatal crash of this nature. So figuring out how to go with the flow rather than facing traffic, which can be a challenge, if you have to cross a 6-lane road twice in order to go with the flow, that poses obviously its own concerns as well. And then the other big thing is using lights at night. Only about a quarter of bicyclist travel is at night based on our count data. About 30% of the serious and fatal injuries and more than half of the overtaking serious and fatal are at nighttime. And when we look at just the fatalities, those numbers go up even more. So more than half of bicyclist fatalities are at night, and nearly 3/4 of the overtaking fatalities are at night. So nighttime increases the risk for a serious overtaking crash 5-fold compared to daytime. If you look at this photograph, there's not I'm not tricking you to spot the bicyclist. There is no bicyclist in this photograph, but look at all the other light sources in there and think about if you've got a bike on your light on your bike, is it a tiny little blinky, or is it something really bright enough to be seen against that complex background, right? So that concludes my safety moment for this month. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Yes, thank you, Mike. I am noticing a change in our society. I'm seeing lots of school kids on electric bikes and scooters going to school. And if that means that these big gas guzzling, polluting, honking SUVs stay at home and their mom's finally letting them go by themselves in a non-polluting device, this is great for society. But we're gonna have to start thinking about, and I think this is gonna go up exponentially, how we're gonna deal with some of these kids going back and forth to schools. And in Oviedo, it's very difficult to cross Broadway. And a lot of the kids in the subdivisions are on the south side, and then they're coming across west, the wrong direction with traffic, exactly what you're explaining. Not sure what to do about that either, but food for thought.
Yeah, and so the
Thanks for this,
speed,
Amendment.
the speed of motorized devices is another compounding factor. Another thing we know from our research is that the faster a cyclist goes, actually, the greater at risk they are. And so you need to have the training to compensate for that additional risk. And so, we're selling e-bikes and 20-mile-an-hour scooters out there without requiring any training those people to deal with the additional risk.
Thank you so much. Mr. Pilgrim?
Good morning, Mike. Thank you. Could you go back to the go with the flow slide real quick? There was a
Mhm.
great picture and you always include wonderful pictures. So this sort of geometry here that you have in this photo kind of creates two decision points for the drivers. Is there any correlation, causation compared to when the bicyclists have a protected area within the right of way where the decision for the driver is kind of cohesive with, all right, I'm looking into the asphalt area and there is no bicyclist and no car, versus where we have kind of, all right, I have to make one check with the sidewalk and then I pull forward a little bit more and then I have to make another check. Like, do we have any, like, how physical infrastructure influences these issues?
Well, not so much physical infrastructure, but the lateral position. So we looked at not only the risk for going against the flow and the sidewalk, but also a bike lane and a travel lane. And we measured also the speeds of those users. So bike lane users are faster than sidewalk riders and travel lane cyclists are faster than bike lane riders. And the risk is proportional. So the risk goes up for a bike lane user going against the flow compared to a sidewalk user going against the flow. And it's simply because the driver's focus is on the left side. That's where the big, fast, heavy things are coming. And those motor vehicles coming from the left outnumber the bicyclists coming from the right by 200 to 1. So that has to be the driver's priority. And looking to the right is, drivers can do that. But the thing is, while they're waiting there for 10, 15, 30 seconds, that's plenty of time for a bicyclist that they didn't see when they first checked to come up in front of them.
Thank you so much. Mr. Mueller?
Tom stole my thunder, but I'll give a little drizzle here, you know? So I wanted to talk about the multimodality or the micro mobility. And, you know, I was helpful to UCF to get rental bikes on campus in 2017. These were pedal bikes, okay? Now think about that. That's 2017. Today, you won't find a pedal bike in any rental place anywhere. It's all scooters. And when I drove in here, I saw what I would think are almost like road scooters parked right outside here on the sidewalk. So where are they riding those things? They're probably, a lot of people don't feel comfortable on the streets. So they're on the sidewalk with those. So I think for every one of that guy you see, you're going to see 2 or 3 skateboard, scooter, whatever it is. So I'm not sure that your first slide that says bicycle up there really is appropriate anymore. And I think if you think about from 2017 to 2024, which is just 7 years, what are we going to see in the next 7 years or less, right? So I think we really need to start looking at this from a whole different point of view and stop talking about bicycles anymore, because there's no such, there are bicycles, but there's no such real thing as bicycles. It's micromobility.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and we're waiting on a new update for the Signal Force system to actually help us to track that better. And the state is working on updating its crash reporting system to help in that respect as well. So in coming years, we'll have better data. But you're right, I'm seeing it anecdotally as I look through the crash reports, that big increases in e-bikes and electric scooters. Yes, the same types, same crash typology is at work there.
Thank you so much. Mr. Campbell?
Thank you again, Mike. Quick question. How long does it take from accident or incident to end up in your statistics?
We've got a 70-day lag in as to what we can access. Yeah, so we have to wait, 2.5 months. The local governments have more immediate, so if something happened within their jurisdiction, they can get immediate access to it, but we have a 70-day.
And is there a hot spot where there are more hits than anywhere else with regarding to cars and bicycles?
Not a spot, but the types of corridors. So the suburban commercial multi-lane corridors are where we see the highest frequency. And And it's these types of crashes, mostly sidewalk riders.
Crossing at Tuscaloosa near Aloma, the bike path. That's a hot spot.
And actually, we just had a fatality there.
2 weeks ago,
But yeah,
I stood there. Watched it.
Thank you so much. Mr. Pereira?
Thank you for that presentation. Your last photo kind of triggered a few questions. The nighttime photo with, I guess, lighting.
Mhm.
Assuming that LED lights are lighter, is there any efforts or attention on expanding LED light implementation, or is there kind of a rule of how we place lights? I noticed that some roads have lights on one side and the other side, they're double. So I guess, is there an intentional effort on like LED, like making lights brighter in any form?
Yes, I mean, there's definitely a move toward LED. There are a number of benefits, improved lighting levels as well as reduced energy costs. So yeah, as the older lights end their lifespan, they're being replaced with LED, and also just being replaced just from the sake of improving the lighting, because of the light levels of those older lights actually decreases over time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. And that's going to be our last question right now. I turn it over to Ms. Frederick. Ms. Frederick?
No, back to me.
Oh, back to Ms. Mary Hart. Thank you so much.
Yes, we do have another report that we're going to hear this morning, and this is new for us, and it's something that we had asked for. The Florida Department of Transportation routinely makes general reports at our board meeting, and we thought that would be a good thing to add for our committee meetings. And so I'd like to welcome Ms. Amy Beckman to the podium to give that report now.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Vice Chair, committee members. My name is Amy Beckman, and I am the FDOT District 5 liaison here for MetroPlan. It's my pleasure to be presenting to you the FDOT agency report for February. First off, excuse me, pardon my allergies. I apologize greatly. First off, if you take a moment under tab 4, you will notice that we have made some updates to your monthly construction report. We've included some maps as well as some hyperlinks that you'll be able to hyperlink out to CFL roads directly to each project. So as you identify them, hopefully that makes it a little bit easier on your part to look at these projects. If you have any additional feedback on the report, please let me know. We're happy to hear it. We are trying to make a product that is beneficial for all of our users. A few very quick, recently completed projects in Orange County. The safety project on State Route 50 and West Colonial Drive and Westmoreland Drive was completed. The improvement project on State Route 435 Kirkman Road from north of Vineland to north of Wendover Drive has also reached final acceptance. Some of you may have noticed the westbound I-4 off-ramp at John Young to McLeod Road completed in late January. That was aimed to alleviate congestion and merging issues on John Young, just north of I-4. In Osceola County, we were able to complete multiple bridge rehabilitation projects along US 192 as well, was also concluded about a month ago. A few quick updates on lane closures in Orange County. March 3rd and 4th, there will be intermittent nightly lane closures on westbound I-4 ramp from Osceola Parkway. Continuing through March 7th, there will be overnight intermittent inside lane closures along north and southbound State Route 436 from north of Old Cheney Highway to north of University Park Drive. Continuing through March 8th, there will be daily intermittent inside lane closures along northbound and southbound. Excuse me, I'm sorry, that was a continuation of the last one from State Route 436. And then March 7th and 8th, intermittent nightly lane ramp closures from eastbound 408 to Orange Avenue. Starting tomorrow through March 2nd, there will be intermittent nightly ramp closures on westbound I-4 from US 441, 1792 Orange Blossom Trail. March 1st through the 3rd, there will be nightly ramp closures on eastbound I-4 from Lee Road. In Osceola County, continuing through March 1st, there will be intermittent lane closures on US 1792 from Portage to Ham Brown. And continuing through 310, motorists can expect lane closures on State Route 500 US 192 between Hibiscus Road and the Brevard County line for paving. Finally, in Seminole County, both Lake Jessup and Geneva Drive detours are scheduled to be ending in the next day or two. for the Oviedo Ultimate Project on State Route 426. And I just have one more very quick announcement that's important to many of you out here. We have an upcoming event, actually two, one in person, one in virtual. It is going to be informational open houses in early March. The first is March 6th. It's a Wednesday from 5 to 7. It is virtual. Advanced registration is required, and it can be done at f.tips/I4 meeting. If you have any questions, please let me know. In person, this open house will be taking place on Thursday, March 7th from 5 to 7 at the Rosen Event Center at 11184 South Apopka Vineland Road. Those are updates on the I-4 Sand Lake Road project. As you know, that interchange is converting into a diverging diamond, and we are going to be starting those detours and reroutings very soon. So those informational public open houses are to discuss that next phase in that conversion to the diverging diamond. So thank you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to hear them. I appreciate your attention.
Thank you so much.
I think Mr. Pigram has a question.
Mr. Pigram?
Yes.
Thank you. Your last update with the Big Sand or Sand Lake Road, there's also the Darrell Carter project that you mentioned. In what you presented, it says that Darrell Carter interchange that's going to have 3 ramps is opening in 2026, but it appears that there will be ramps that will be ready well ahead of that could possibly relieve Sand Lake Road during that major construction. Do you have a timeline there for those Darrell Carter ramps? And if there's a target, we're going to have this one, the westbound by this. And so that's my first question. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
And then second was that those projects and the I-4 Ultimate work coming from Kirkman South, understandably, since the original design for that corridor, stormwater design requirements have changed, and there's been a lot of development that has impacted it. And there's certainly a lot of drainage improvements that are happening concurrently. But we also know that area specifically lacks affordable housing. So when we have these acres of stormwater ponds that are going in, like I think of between Turkey Lake Road and Darrell Carter right now, it's just, I want to say half a mile long because of how narrow that section is. Has the DOT explored any sort of program to do stormwater chambering? I know with Sunrail, there was constraints with available acreage, so they actually put the stormwater under the parking lot. So when we have these massive stormwater ponds, I'm just wondering if DOT is a partner that is at least exploring, can we use this real estate more effectively for the region's needs beyond transportation?
Both of those are excellent questions, and I'm more than happy to go back and look at them. I'll be honest, I don't want to give any false information. So I will definitely check in on those Darrell Carter and Sand Lake. I know, like I said, the informational public open house is taking place to start discussing when some of those things are going to be happening. But I will look into the Darrell Carter ramps as well to see if they're going to do staging or whether they're going to do it all together and what an updated timeline looks like. And I'll also look into what the agency's looking at as far as you were talking about using the storm water drainage property more effectively, if there was any other changes or if we're just keeping the storm drainage. Is that appropriately surmising what your question was?
From what I understand, DOT's first project in the state that I'm aware of, or at least in this district, to do stormwater exfiltration under the parking lot was Sunrail because of the constraints. So I don't know that it's been
Expanded
beyond like a massive stormwater pond, but just knowing the metro area, there's constraints in real estate, and now we're using this massive acreage for ponds. Is there anything that the district can do to help the community and the region outside of just stormwater?
I will definitely look into that and get you some answers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm turning back over to Ms. Mary Horn.
Thanks, Amy. If you could, before you leave the podium, maybe you could repeat one more time the link for that virtual meeting again.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It is at, let me find it on my paper here so I give it appropriately. It's fdot.tips/I4 meeting. That is the registration link for the March 6th virtual attendance.
Okay, so yeah, if you can get some more information about that and I will share with the group and let me know if you need more information about getting to the meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Just one more thing I want to bring up is we do have some flyers on the table over there about Vision Zero. Our Vision Zero efforts are continuing throughout the region. And there was a series of 3 open houses in Osceola County to get a look at the Vision Zero action plan for Osceola County. One was held last night in St. Cloud. There are 2 more next week on Wednesday at Champions Gate. And on Thursday, Vice Chair Council at Poinciana campus of Valencia. So take a flyer and attend those if you are so inclined. And with that, we have no changes to our printed agenda. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Rachel Frederick, who will call the roll.
Thank you. I'll ask all committee members to keep their microphones off until called. Battler. Bobinger,
Here.
Bosley,
Present.
Campbell,
Present.
Coleman,
Here.
Council, El Badri, Gus, Lopez, Mott, Mueller, thank you. O'Hanlon, Pereira,
Present.
Peters, Pigram,
Present.
Pizzo,
Present.
Salas,
Present.
Sabita, Webster,
Present.
White.
Present.
Madam Vice Chair, that concludes the roll call. We do have a quorum.
Thank you so much. We will now hear public comments on action items. Do we have people online who want to speak to any of these items? If so, please use the raise hands function on your screen to press *9 on your phone keypad. When we call your name, the host will unmute your microphone. You will see the button pop up that says the host wants to unmute you. Accept that prompt to activate your microphone. We will ask that you provide your name, address for the record. Please hold your comments to 2 minutes. Are there any comments at this time?
We do have a hand raised on the virtual side. It's Mr. Bob Horner, and I'm going to promote him in so that he can give his comment.
Mr. Bob
Can you hear
Warner, you are recognized.
Thank you. Bob Horner, thank you for letting me attend this meeting. Ms. Horn, I just heard mention the Vision Zero project, which I've attended several of those community events. And this has been the hot button for me for many, many years now, is the tragic situation we have on our roads. And there's a lot of talk about infrastructure and signs and all this other extreme cost to this thing. But what I'm not seeing in this, in the program is a stronger emphasis, nor am I seeing on the roadways as any enforcement. I think our current administration and the sheriff's department has completely walked away from any enforcement on this stuff. We see speeders, we all see it. It's an epidemic. It's a culture issue that we have in our community. And I would like to see more emphasis placed on the sheriff's department to start enforcing our rules and our laws and our law enforcement. This is just jacking up our insurance costs. It's causing deaths on this stuff. And there needs to be more emphasis on the enforcement of our rules and get these high-speed speeders off they're dangerous and it's killing so many people. And I think there just needs to be more focus on the enforcement. So that's enough. That's what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Bob Warner, what would be your address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, 8742 Landsmere Lane, Orlando, Florida.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you for your comment. Do we have any people present in the boardroom today who wish to make a comment on these action items?
I have received no comments, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you so much. Moving on. we have 3 action items today. First, the approval of the minutes.
Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair Teresa Mott,
Thank you so much.
I move to approve the minutes as printed.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
That's Mr. Boinger? Yes. Thank you so much. I have a first and a second. We are looking to approve the CAC meetings from January 2024. These are in tab 1 in the agenda packets. We do have a motion, Ms. Mott placed, and we have a second with Mr. Boinger. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? If none, this motion carries. Next, we are considering a request to recommend approval of FDOT's amendment to the Transportation Improvement Program. Information is provided on tab 2. Mr. Jason Sartorio, sorry if I mispronounced that, of the Metro Plan Board, Orlando, will provide the information. Mr. Sartorio?
Morning, Vice Chair and committee members. My name is Jason Sartorio. This morning, I have 1 tip amendment for you. And additional information regarding this amendment is located in tab 2 of your agendas. This morning's amendment is for a resurfacing project on State Road 535 from north of US 192 to south of International Drive. The amendment will increase construction funding in fiscal year 2024 due to scope changes and cost increases for materials. As I mentioned earlier, you have some additional information regarding this amendment located in tab 2 of your agendas. With that being said, unless there are any questions, we are asking for your vote of approval of the amendment. Thank you.
Move approval.
I second that. Judy Pisa.
Thank you so much. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The 2025-26 UPWP for submittal for FDOT, tab 3. Next, we're asking for approval of the fiscal year 2025-26 Unified Planning Work Program. Supplemental information is provided in tab 3. Mr. Alex Trauger of the Metro Plan Board Orlando will provide the information. Mr. Trauger, you are recognized.
Good morning, everybody. Today we are asking for your approval of our draft UPWP, which is the first step of our processing this document with the Florida DOT. Last month, I gave an overview presentation of our internal operating budget. This month, for your approval is that draft for submittal. As your vice chair mentioned, in tab 3 of your agenda packet, you'll find a board action fact sheet and a hyperlink, which includes the document on our online for your review. Again, just as a reminder, this is our internal operating budget based on federal and state law. It is a 2-year budget, so it includes fiscal 25 and fiscal 26. It focuses on our planning efforts as required by federal law to ensure our certification and compliance with all of those federal regulations. Our staffing structure and consultant services are representative of satisfying each of those requirements and delivering the expectations and goals of our board. And most importantly, at the very bottom there, having this document in place allows those federal funds to flow into our region to advance these projects. Again, a little bit on schedule, refresher from last month. We're at this second step of the process, which is our approval of this draft UPWP for submittal. We'll be taking that to our board at their March 13th meeting. Soon after, we'll be transmitting that to Florida DOT and Federal Highway for their review. And then we'll be bringing back that final document back to our advisory committee and board process during your April cycle, but at our May 8th board meeting in time to submit that to back to DOT, so we can begin our fiscal year July 1st with those funds available for us to keep working. The document hasn't changed this from last year to this year. Same structure, same 10 core tasks. Majority of these are required by state guidance, but we also do have that links planning task, which allows us to pass planning funds directly through to links for their strategic planning works. As it relates to consultant services, about 50% of our budget does go out to consultant services and supports the different works that are listed on this slide. I talked about these a little bit in detail last month, but what's important to note is we do have some works that started this fiscal year that you're going to be learning more about over the next couple of months that will complete and will be continued and finalized in fiscal 25. You got an update on the 2050 plan last month, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about that. So our staffing consultant services is really centered around delivering that core required product. We're also going to be continuing our annual traffic signal retiming and before and after works and conducting some corridor and sidewalk feasibility works to get those projects ready for the work program. And we're going to be continuing our public survey, our public opinion survey. You're going to be hearing about our 2024 public opinion survey from Mary Ann and team probably in the next month or two. But this budget here is looking for that next survey, which is taking place in fiscal 26, calendar year 26. So with that, we do have our estimated revenues. Nothing changed from this slide to last slide. You will see that surge of federal funds in fiscal 24, our current year. Those are the funds that we received, direct recipient for the Safe Roads and Streets for All grant. Those funds are waning down as we're delivering the regional and localized plans. So the majority of those funds will be spent in current year, but we will see some of those funds flow to fiscal 25, which is consistent with our grant agreement with Federal Highway. So you'll see those funds in there. As we go into fiscal 25, fiscal 26, those are more typical revenues as it relates to kind of Metro Plan Orlando's operating budget, and them primarily funded with federal planning funds, which are derived from our urbanized area. As I mentioned a moment ago, we also pass funds directly through to links. About 5% of our budget is passed through directly to links for their strategic planning works, which supports their transit long-range planning. The first line item there are PL funds from our consolidated planning grant. Those, again, go directly to links for that transportation planning work. The transportation disadvantaged fund supports links administration of the Access Links program. So that's paratransit service for those in most need. Not included in our budget, but really important to note as we're talking about pass-through funds is $7 million a year is passed through of our Metro Plan Orlando urban attributable funds to go to Links's capital program. So they use those funds for their transit asset management to support eligible capital expenses. So again, that $7 million line item, you won't find that in the UPWP, you'll find that in the TIP. But again, it's important to note as we're talking about passing funds through to support other regional priorities. So with that, as I mentioned earlier, we are requesting your approval today of this draft document for submittal to DOT, the first of a few steps along the way. So this won't be the last time you hear from us about this topic this year. But again, we are asking for your approval today. If you have any questions, I'll do my best to field those. But thank you.
Judy Pizzo, I move to approve.
Thank you so
Second.
much. Do I have a second? Thank you so much. Okay. We have a motion and we have a second. Is there any discussion? If there's no discussion, all in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. We have four presentations today. So I'll ask all members and presenters to be mindful of the time. Members, if you have any questions for the presenters, please stand your name card on the end. We will call those who have questions at the end of each presentation. If you have to move along because if we have to move along because of the time, please forward any questions to Ms. Horn. Vision Zero status update. Our first presentation is an update of Vision Zero Safety Initiative. Mr. Mike Wilson, MetroPlan Orlando staff, will share this information. Mr. Wilson, you have our attention.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Good morning again. So update again, starting off with our public engagement efforts. Shown you this before, but that we've got the feedback map where we can where people can report on what they've seen in the way of problems out in the real world. The little different description of that this time, showing you kind of the breakdown by modes. Seeing that it's the lion's share of concerns having to do with driving, but then you see walking and bicycling significant as well. And this is just a sample over here on the right-hand side of a particular crash plot and commentary about a particular street with a speeding problem. And they even provided a photograph of a car that actually crashed running off the road. Fortunately, not a serious incident. FDOT held its Safety Strategic Plan workshop on January 31st. By all accounts, it was a big success. Had really good feedback from law enforcement and educators in the morning, midday advocates and others giving their perspective, and then a very big turnout for elected officials, TAC members, et cetera. In the afternoon, they actually had more people than they had planned for, so they needed a few extra tables. So very good feedback provided. FDOT is also going to other MPOs in the district, and so they'll come back to consolidate everything they've heard from throughout the district to put together their 5-year plan. And we'll continue to coordinate with them as the months and years proceed. Some additions to the hub site. We've published an elected official guide. It has gone out to all elected officials in Central Florida, helping explain to them what their role is as an elected official in the Vision Zero process, so that they can be most effective at making the changes. Marianne's team has put together a safety guide for kids that will actually be ready middle of March. We're printing 5,000 copies, and of course, digital copies are available on the hub site. Also available now are a fact sheet on the high injury network and a new page that looks at trend analysis. So you can scroll through it and see by mode, variety of different trend and characteristics for different types of crashes, whether it's pedestrian, motor vehicle, motorcyclist, et cetera. We held our fourth task force meeting last week, had discussion about the benchmarking process. That's the process by which we look at our existing plans and policies and how do we improve on them to bring them in line with the Vision Zero principles and the Vision Zero plan. So good discussion on that, which is ongoing. Starting to pair the countermeasures that we've identified with the projects, with the corridors identified in the high injury network. So that's an ongoing process, and had discussion about that process. Here's an example of a high injury corridor fact sheet. These are being finalized now for the top 30 corridors in our region, which gives a snapshot of how many crashes, what types, what locations, et cetera. Some discussion with the task force about the prioritization process. These are the key elements of prioritization: equity, obviously the safety history, and then the benefit that we expect to get out of the countermeasures that are identified, and then and then how readily can we get this project built. The federal government has published its notice of funding opportunity for the next round of grants for the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. The NOFO, as we call it, came a couple of months earlier than we expected, which sort of threw a monkey wrench into our plans, because we were hoping to have all of our plans completed by May, June of this year, which would then make us eligible for submitting for implementation grants, actually building infrastructure based on those plans. But since they published it just last week and they moved up the deadline to May 16th for those applications, and we must have eligible plans adopted by April 30th, that makes it really unfeasible for us to be in line for those implementation grants. However, there are still opportunities for additional planning and demonstration grants. So we're going to be looking at that over the next few months. And you can see the deadlines there are more forgiving. So we've got until August to come up with our ideas for and a thorough application for how we want to proceed in that realm. Next steps, once again, just reminding you of the project schedule. So you can see that here that we're in that prioritization and strategies process of the plan, and looking still to adopt our plans in the spring. Although now that we don't have a deadline for the implementation grants, we can do a little more due diligence in getting our plans exactly the way we want. So not a big deadline in that respect. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
So I see we have questions. Ms. Pizzo, I recognize you.
Mhm.
Oh, let's start on this side. Ms. Webster.
Can you tell us what's being done to make rail and bus service more effective, to get people out of their cars so that we can do less of, I mean, our roads are just becoming more and more crowded, and that's not expected to not happen in the future. So unfortunately, I don't see a lot of plans to increase bus and rail, and I know a lot of that is dependent on funding, but we've been working on funding for years, so give me some happy news.
Yeah, like you said, it's funding. So we have plenty of plans that we can't fund. So I know Orange County is discussing bringing back the penny sales tax referendum, which would generate quite a bit. And if passed, that's about the only thing that I see on the horizon that would help in that respect.
Thank you. Do you have another one?
Well, we hear that all the time. I just would like to push for more to happen, and I don't know how we make that happen.
Thank you. Ms. Mott, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. All these proactive measures just make my heart smile. Just want to encourage you guys to keep up the great work. Seems like you're doing everything right. That concludes my comment.
Thank you so much. Ms. O'Badry?
Y'all know I'm a really big fan of Vision Zero. I've attended a couple of the meetings. Obviously, I think a lot of people in this room know what Vision Zero is, and there has been a lot of work towards Vision Zero over the past couple of years. One of the meetings I attended was phenomenally done. It just was really disappointing how many people showed up. I think it's for the folks that knew what Vision Zero was, or the folks that came to the meeting. But I do know in the community where I attended the meeting, there's so much conversation about transportation and safety, but I don't know if they connected that to the words Vision Zero. I really love the marketing materials. They were phenomenal, especially the children's specific materials. But just generally, I think my comment is more about how do we make this language more accessible to more folks so that they understand that their input is so critical to this process, so that they show up for some of these sessions. But again, it is really incredible work, and I just want to thank you for it.
Thank you, Ms. O'Badry. Mr. Pigram, you're recognized.
Thank you. Mike, 2 presentations in one day. I guess that means 2 questions from me today. If I could get your help pulling up the kind of an overall of the higher injury network slide real quick. I want to kind of combine topics here. So our partners at DOT presented, the work that's going to be happening at Sand Lake Road and I Drive and that whole interchange with I-4. So when we talk about, Ms. Webster's concern with funding constraints and saying that project is funded, and it's at least what's highlighted here, that is a major issue or challenge, is that whole corridor in that exact interchange. So I guess my question is, with everything we've done with Vision Zero and learned, is all of the lessons learned and design standards and practices from Vision Zero being implemented with that DOT scope, with that interchange, or is that interchange being done to DOT typical spec? And then we're going to have to chase grants to do amenities and modifications that align with Vision Zero.
Well, I mean, the design on that is already done. So, but of course, FDOT has its own policies and standards regardless of what we do. So everything's going to be built to that. I will say that from everything that we've seen from FDOT in the past couple of years, there's been a significant shift in their approach to projects, looking at the target speed approach as opposed to the design speed approach. I can't speak to that one particular project itself, and I haven't looked at the plans for it, et cetera. So, but just in general, there's definitely the will within the department and the district. But there's always competing interests. So.
Thank you so much. Ms. Pizzo.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Totally off topic from your presentation, but from your first slide, you had a little comment blurb about speed tables or speed bumps. And is there anything statistic out there that shows whether those are really viable? Do they make a difference in an area where speed tables or speed bumps are implemented?
I haven't seen it. Of course, the thing is, speed humps and tables typically, historically, have been done more on local neighborhood streets. However, with the South Orange Blossom Trail project that FDOT recently completed, first time they're actually doing speed tables on a 6-lane state arterial. All right. So we'll see. I imagine that because that was just finished up and we should be getting, the operational data as far as what the operating speeds are now. And then hopefully over time, we'll have some time to look at crash data and see how that works.
Thank you so much. Mr. O'Hanlon.
Yeah, Mike, this is that same project. I believe I saw that they put the barriers down the center of the road, so you just can't cross indiscriminately and get run over. Now you got to be run over at specific instances on the road. I think that's phenomenal, because if you go outside our country, all over the world, they've put these things in to control where people can cross the streets. So I think it's great we're putting them here in America. And what I would like is a report that shows us how effective they are. So maybe we can get some money to put them in some other places also. Oh, we got a comment. Yeah, let's hear.
Sorry, with the OBT project that just completed in October, the plan is to do a 1 month, a 6 month, and a 12-month study at the results of this. The 1 month is showing that there was a decrease in the overall speed, not less than the target speed, because the target speed did go down, but it did show, I believe it was a 5 mph drop in the overall average speed at the 1 month mark. And we are just approaching the 6 month mark. So there will be, as I said, continuing studies at the 6 and 12 month mark, and then we'll be able to look at that.
My concern wasn't the speed, it was fatalities.
At this point in time, there have been no further fatalities in that corridor since the inception, since the completion of that OBT project in that sector.
Awesome. If there's no more questions, thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate your presentation. Regional transportation for all plan. We have a presentation from Ms. Sarah Larson of the Metro Plan Orlando. who will give us some information about the regional transportation for all plan. Ms. Larson, we're ready for your presentation.
Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
My name is Sarah Larson. I'm a transportation planner here with Metro Plan Orlando. And this morning I'll be giving you a brief status update on our Transportation for All plan. And you might be wondering, what does that mean? Well, our Transportation for All plan will be an update and an expansion on our Title VI and Limited English Proficiency Plan, or LEP. And so when I say expansion, what I mean is we'll be going off of USDOT's recent equity action plan. We'll be using that federal guidance to help us expand on what we understand about serving underserved, overburdened, and disadvantaged communities. USDOT's equity action plan, a part of this plan includes what they've called their equitable transportation communities, which is a web map for across the country, highlighting different communities and identifying whether they're underserved, overburdened, or disadvantaged. So let's talk about those disadvantages. We've got some obstacles that are commonly faced include lack of mobility options, so no access to a car, no access to smartphones, so they can't, or credit cards, so they can't use Uber or Lyft or other TNCs, as we call them, or that buses aren't frequent or direct enough. Infrastructure does not support safe and comfortable mobility. So that means, for example, lack of sidewalks or comfortable bicycling facilities. Poor air quality and poor environmental quality. This is exactly what it is. So high levels of particulate matter in the air or proximity to toxic and hazardous sites. Poor health, which means a high incidence of chronic diseases such as asthma or heart disease. Mental health issues, again, would fall under poor health. And then social vulnerability, so higher rates of physical disabilities or a higher share of rent-burdened populations. So during our 2021 public opinion research survey, we asked the public, which was over 3,000 respondents, how would they define transportation equity? And, you know, from that wealth of responses that we received, we kind of created this definition that you see here: transportation that is available, accessible, affordable for everyone, no matter their background. So some key pieces of the Transportation for All plan. We are, again, utilizing that USDOT data and presenting the Central Florida community demographics. So, you know, looking at how this is for our region based off of that federal guidance. And so we're going to identify some geographic areas within our region. And then we're going to develop what is also known as partner agency network. So identifying different members in the community and organizations in the community that we can reach out to and get in touch with maybe people who haven't been a part of the process so far when it comes to doing our 2050 MTP, for example, making sure that we get feedback from the most vulnerable populations. So talking about, again, that transportation underserved communities. So that's what we'll be calling our groups of communities that we've identified as being underserved. And so what I want to highlight here is that these are not the only places that disadvantages exist in our region. And they're not the only places that we'll be studying or covering. We are looking at the region as a whole when we're doing this plan, but we just want to highlight those communities that are transportation underserved. And so how we came across, or how we created this, and I'll show the map now, this group of communities is we're not only using the USDOT's equitable transportation communities, we've also added in what's called CGEST, which is from the Justice 40. So again, using that federal guidance. And the benefit of using CJST is that by having those mapped out areas, that puts us eligible for some grant funding by having that map there. So again, using what we can during our plans to make sure that we are doing the best for our community. And this is the development of the plan timeline. So we are here now. We're to our committees and the board of this status update. We've already been doing our equity audit, looking at that map. We've taken those communities and run some analysis to understand better about how we've been doing the transportation planning for those communities. And what we can do to improve that. We've also been working on our Title VI and LEP, again, that's Limited English Proficiency plan. And then also we've been identifying that stakeholder network and we'll be reaching out to them soon to have a virtual event to get their feedback on this plan. And that concludes my status update. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Ms. Al-Badri, or you were recognized.
Hey, Sarah, great presentation. Just a question on Justice 40 communities.
Yeah.
Is this list comprehensive of the 3-county region?
Yeah, so I mean, the bulleted list is just generally, where you can kind of, we've named them essentially. But you can see the map. Those in orange are the transportation underserved communities. So that's what we're going off of. So that's Justice 40 plus the US DOT map.
Could you just, I feel like the town of Eatonville might qualify. Maybe it's so small, it's not listed here. But
I'm sure that it's
just something of note.
No,
But otherwise, thank you I think this is incredible work, so thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Al-Badri. Mr. Pigram, you're recognized.
Thank you for the presentation and for pulling up this map. So when I think of these underserved communities, one of the interesting movements I would consider on this map is those that live in Osceola County, but they work at the airport. So in this case, the airport's not considered an underserved community because it has so many modes of transportation in the city's jurisdiction. But I'm trying to commute to the airport from Osceola, so that's not a community trip, it's a regional trip. So I would be going from an underserved to an area that's overserved because it's in the city's jurisdiction. So I'm just kind of curious how we define, like, I'm underserved, but I'm leaving I'm leaving the city of Kissimmee's jurisdiction. I don't necessarily, unless maybe I'm getting groceries and things like that, need support for local movement. I need help getting Sunrail connected to the airport because I have to pay tolls every day to drive versus if I could take the train, it costs me 20 cents a day to go to my employer. So I'm just kind of trying to understand that relationship between local movements, regional movements, and where people are underserved versus overserved.
Yeah, so I guess a little bit about that. So, what we're doing when I'm talking about this analysis, and I'm not having that here for you today yet, but we're looking at, for example, how are roads safety wise, for example, how are those roads faring on, overlaying the high injury network, let's say, with our transportation underserved communities, and looking at, do we have a higher frequency of the high injury network in our transportation underserved communities? What does that mean? And looking at it like that, and also looking at our other metrics that we put into our 2045 MTP. And so that kind of flows through. So, safety and security, health and environment, investment in economy. So you're looking at all those 5 different metrics, and we've outlined different key metrics that are in each of those 5 goal areas, and comparing it. So again, we're not only looking at those transportation underserved communities, we're looking at the region as a whole, but we're looking at how things, if there's like a higher propensity for different negatives
negative externalities of the transportation system.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something that, Sarah was covering the US DOT's ETC Explorer has a dozen variations of what they determine as transportation insecure. And to answer your particular question, kind of for those in kind of the Osceola kind of south area, it's a composite. So the ETC is a composite of multiple different types of underserved communities or insecurities. And one of them that falls under transportation is called transportation access burden. And that gets exactly to what you're speaking about. Communities that have to travel a long distance or a long work commute are deemed that access insecure. So that is accounted for in this analysis. So.
Thank you. Ms. Pizzo, you are recognized.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Very good presentation. There's a lot of information here, but I believe there's a community that's overlooked. I don't see it. I see a little brown or tan blurb on your map for the East Orange County area. Specifically, Bithlo, it is very underserved. There was a recent fatality there. Bicyclist was killed on Highway 50. I had family members that lived out in that area. The demographics are changing. It's a lot of Puerto Ricans are moving into that area because the value of the land is such that they can afford to buy the land out there. It is grossly underserved, and I would like to see it added to your list here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Mueller, you are recognized.
My question is really basic. And can you define what it means, transportation undeserved communities? It kind of goes along with what you're talking about.
Yeah, so transportation underserved communities, that's the name that we've coined for this. And it is combining the US DOT's equitable transportation communities, the ETCs that they've identified through their series of metrics with the Justice 40 CGES, which is their more climate associated, environmental associated list of communities. And so we've fused them together to create this transportation underserved. And so within that, as Alex was mentioning, within those pre-created maps that going off of the federal guidance, they've highlighted places that have long commutes or places that are communities that struggle with connectivity to different services or to goods. So we're looking at those types of communities.
Okay, because going along with what Judy said, I look at the map and see where I live, and we have no bus service. We have no transportation, mass transportation of any kind. It's all cars, and it's blue. And so I don't quite understand the correlation. To me, it's underserved community, but maybe I don't. That's why I asked for the explanation, because I don't understand.
Yeah, so I would say, and to Sarah's point, this is the worst of the worst. The communities that have it the most challenging, considering the 20 factors that account for the CGES in the US DOT. So there might be some instances where a community is scoring low on one of the 20, but what you're seeing here is where it's in poor condition across all of the criteria. What I'm going to recommend, because there is a wealth of data, we're going to share, I think we can share some of the ETC information so you can see the various factors that go into this analysis. This probably is the most comprehensive and broadest brush approach that one could take in determining or kind of emphasizing a community, because we have looked at 20 plus factors historically. To put it in context, in our current Title VI plan, our non-discrimination plan, we call these communities equity emphasis areas. So this is kind of our rebrand or kind of reterming this under kind of the new guidance. But these are the communities, the areas with the greatest challenge, you know, acknowledging it to Sarah's point. There are other areas, I think a couple slides ago, that we're also considering, but these are the communities where it's the most challenge. And we can share that data with you, and you can zoom in on the map and see where your neighborhood fits into some of these characteristics. But when you kind of make all things equal, this is where challenge is greatest.
Thank you so much. Ms. White? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Pizzo, were you finished? That's my, yes. Ms. White, we are recognized.
Thank you for recognizing me. I think some of the confusion is the terminology, and I really appreciate the definition coming from public health. With the Florida Department of Health Office of Minority Health, I get the terminology, but the confusion can be underserved communities. For example, I love what Mike said, or was it Alex? Someone said something about transportation insecure. Underserved represents or gives the idea that there's no service in those areas. That's not the case. It's yes, Sunrail goes through Sanford. Yes, there are buses. However, the affordability, the access, the length of time for travel for someone on link and transportation, and the lack of owning a vehicle or purchasing gas or paying for maintenance that leads to transportation insecurity. It's not that we are not voting in and we're not putting sidewalks in place. We're not putting buses on route. The Sunrail stops are not there. It's that the community that they're serving, they are still insecure because of those socioeconomic reasons. So I think that terminology, transportation underserved communities, maybe going back to what we heard earlier, transportation insecure communities may be a better fit. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. White. Mr. Pierre?
Yes, sorry, thank you for your presentation. Quick recommendation to the last point that was just made. Whenever, I guess there's an opportunity of aligning terminology that we're using here, that we could align it to, maybe there's another industry measure. So Ms. White, I know that she's doing a lot with Seminole County Health. And so there's a lot of initiatives with transportation. So I think seeing the alignment and using wherever we can, using the same methodology, or showing that where we're using the same methodology probably would help as well. But just a quick recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Webster, you're recognized.
We've talked about surveys, we've talked about plans. My question is, are there funds to implement solutions?
Well, that's the benefit of using the CGS data, is then that puts us more eligible to compete for federal grants using the Justice 40. So that's why we integrated those into the map. So that way we can try to get those funds.
And do those, if we're going to implement, do they focus on bus and rail?
I mean, ideally.
Okay. You know, I've been sitting in on these meetings for a number of years, and we keep hearing the same things over and over and over and over again. And I'm just really eager to have some things be implemented and to really do something. So.
Thank you, Ms. Webster. We appreciate your comment. Ms. Sarah, thank you so much for your presentation. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
2050 MTP status update. We have a presentation from Ms. Taylor Lawrence of the Metro Plan Orlando, who will give us an update on the 2050 Metro Plan Transportation Plan. Ms. Lawrence, we're ready for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Taylor Lawrence, and I'll be presenting an update on our 2050 MTP. We kicked this off at your last meeting in January, and I promised you'd see a lot more of me, and here I am. So to get started, the status report document, there will always be a written component to this, which is in your agendas under General Information, Section 9. I think it's item D, if I'm remembering that correctly. So you can look over that as well. But a summary of our ongoing work, we've kicked off a lot of our background and existing conditions analyses to get this going. You'll be hearing more about our public participation plan at your next meeting in April. We're well underway with our existing conditions and area profile analyses, and our travel patterns and origin destination work, kind of a little bit of what we were talking about earlier, is also getting started. So that'll help inform the development of the rest of the 2050 MTP. Goals and objectives, we're reviewing the 2045 goals, using those as our starting point to see what updates, if any, need to be made to match our vision for 2050. So that will be something that we, again, talk more about at your meeting in April. We'll have a little more meat to chew on at that point, but that's getting started. And when it comes to our technical work, continuing from what we mentioned last month, we have continued our coordination with FDOT on the regional planning model, as well as kicked off our congestion management process. Then also back in February, one of our more recent meetings was the first 2050 MTP technical workshop. We've got a link to a recording of that here in the slides, and that can be shared with you after the meeting if you'd like to watch it. But our discussion at that meeting really focused on the background and purpose of the MTP, kind of deep diving that topic, what the roles and responsibilities are for those who attend these technical workshops. And then about 30 minutes of the whole discussion focused on the core tasks and activities, deep diving those specific topics, what work will be performed as we reach each of the key milestones of the project. So if you have any questions about those, I'd recommend watching the video or reach out to Marianne or myself, and we'll be happy to talk through that with you. And looking forward, we do have our next MTP technical workshop scheduled for April. That is really going to cover the existing conditions and area profile preview, the goals and objectives refinement, as well as a discussion of the drivers of change and future trends. I do have our notes from our last discussion to make sure those topics are included. And as I have promised in the past, any of those discussions that we have there will be recapped in a presentation for you here in these CAC meetings. So you get all the same information whether you attend that workshop or not, depending on your availability. So looking at the overall schedule, we're still very early in the process, but as you can see, more work is getting started. And within the next month or two, you'll see even more work. That'll probably be 2 or 3 of my slides in future presentations. So thank you for your time, for providing this update this morning. I am happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Taylor. Mr. Pigram, thank you. You're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Good to see you again. Thank you for coming by. I'll just kind of reiterate, if I'm not able to participate in those meetings, I would like, as we look forward to 2050, when we're defining goals, objectives, certainly we're going to have the heat map that says these are the capacity constraints with incremental growth between now and 2050, but there are going to be corridors that are existing now that do not necessarily have capacity constraints or level of service constraints in the future. Like I think the example I gave was Dr. Phillips Boulevard. The 2045 says there's no issues at all. And so that's 120-foot right of way where only 60 feet of it is actually being physically used. So I look at the 2050 as, okay, is there an opportunity to identify corridors that, especially with the adoption of technology that Mr. O'Hanlon, I'm sure, is going to speak on, that we can reallocate those corridors to other community needs, and here are opportunities.
Thank you for your comment. Just to expand, some of that discussion will come up during our needs assessment process, where we're looking at not just volume over capacity ratio needs. So that's a very limiting factor, especially when we're looking at safety. That's going to be my example topic. You may have plenty of capacity on that facility, but safety is the primary concern, and we're trying to save lives. So we're going to be using a multi-criteria analysis to identify those needs, not just volume over capacity.
Thank you so much. Mr. O'Hanlon, you're recognized.
Thank you. Nothing against you, Taylor. This is so very frustrating to me that there's so much going on behind the scenes, something as simple as Mike with scooters and electric bikes taking kids to school, to NEO, a Chinese company, already has humanoid robots in the factory helping build the cars. This is happening today. We don't even know what it's going to be like in 2030. 2050 is gonna be nothing like any of us in this room envision. We can't even envision 2030, okay? And this really goes back to the last presentation too. You know, Lynx better wake up, okay? Or the bus service is gone because someone else is gonna put robo buses on the street for 1/10 the fare that Lynx charges and make a killing, okay? Why are we not preparing for the advent of autonomous buses and cars? Okay, think about how you have bus service that's tenfold what we have now. Instead of every 15 minutes, it comes every 90 seconds. And it costs 1/10 what it costs today. We need to be modeling this because this is well before 2030, let alone 2040, 2050. We need to start preparing for the stuff that's going on behind the scenes. Please, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Hara.
Okay, it is on. Here we go. Thank you, Mr. O'Hanlon. There is a lot of work going on with our TISMO master plan, looking at the technology and implementation. I believe Eric's given some presentations about that recently, as well as looking at our electrification plan, electric vehicle plan. I'm close. I'm getting it close. We will be having discussions about the implementation rates of these future technologies as part of these next meetings. So I will be talking more about that and directly addressing it at our April meeting together. So there will be a lot more coming.
I look forward to hearing about it.
Taylor, thank you for your wonderful presentation today. We appreciate it. We have TSMNO Master Plan Status Update. Now we'll hear from Mr. Eric Hill of the Metro Plan Orlando staff, who will update us on the Transportation Systems Management and Operations Master Plan. Mr. Hill, we're ready to hear what you have for us.
Thank you. And good morning.
Good morning.
Madam Vice Chairman and committee members. And this presentation is for Mr. O'Hanlon, who spoke so eloquently about the need to prepare for robo taxis, self-driving cars, flying vehicles. How do we prepare? How do we develop a transportation infrastructure to accommodate all this new technology that is emerging? And so this is an update on our TSMO master plan. It's been a while since I've spoken with you. There's been some nuance in the study that has delayed our work, but we do expect to come back to you in April, at your next meeting, with the results for this study, as well as the strategies that we are recommending. When we started this work, we developed a steering committee of our stakeholders so that we could get their input. The organizations with asterisks are organizations that are not necessarily part of this in terms of projects, because they have their own funding source, their own strategies, their own plans that they're going to be putting together. We've had 6 meetings since we started this work, one just about every quarter. Our next meeting with our steering committee is March the 20th. And Kimberly Horn is our lead consultant. This morning I have Shana Eaton with me from Kimberly Horn. So TSMO, I think everyone around in this room is aware of what TSMO is. And the elevator speech I use is the use of information communication technology to improve mobility, safety, and reliability of our transportation network. Now that's a short elevator ride, that's 1 floor, but it's enough for everyone to understand. And if you relate that to your own personal lives, think about your smartphones. That's what you use pretty much to navigate roadways if you don't have a navigation within your vehicle, which many of us do. But that's what we're doing. We're trying to implement the emerging technology into our transportation system. These are a list of TSMO strategies that typically come up. You can go ahead and take a look at them. I think that last bullet is one that's near and dear to Mr. O'Hanlon. And again, this is not just a presentation from Mr. O'Hanlon. It's for everyone, but I know that he's in the front row and center. That last asterisk down at the bottom, low tech, high tech. There's the high tech, you hear a lot about. But the low tech can be just simple agreements between the jurisdictions on, fiber connections, cybersecurity, sharing of information and data. That's low tech. But it gets us a lot of mileage in terms of how we can develop and leverage technology. This is scope of work. There are 10 tasks, but the remaining 4 kind of like administrative that really don't have any bearing on the work per se. The first is we have completed the vision, goals, and objectives through documentation with the steering committee. And they align pretty much with the 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is going to be consistent with the update. Existing conditions that are in place, we learned from our steering committee, which helped us identify the needs as well as the strategies in funding. And spoiler alert, funding is not much more that's gonna materialize. We're working with what we have to work with. We're gonna do the best we can. Now, there's some federal programs that are grants that can help, but that's not what's gonna continue to move the ball down the field, so to speak. Because after you capitalize something, you have to maintain and operate that. And if we are going to start to move towards more efficient vehicles, fuel efficient vehicles and electric vehicles, well, our fuel tax revenue is going to continue to decline. So we have to become more efficient with the resources that we have. The regional architecture, that is a requirement of the Federal Highway Administration for us to use as we put together these systems. And it's very technical. It's not real good reading. I don't think there's a lot of text to it. It's mostly diagrams. But I'll just touch on that a little bit. And then the prioritization matrix is what we have developed so that we can prioritize the strategies that we have identified. The vision, again, how can we leverage technology and improve our mobility? And then the goals, again, are pretty much the same as what was in the MTP. The needs that we identified, we did a gap analysis and we went through interviews with our stakeholders. We went through one interview and then we had to go through another interview because there was some nuance in what we identified. But it essentially looked at where we are now, where we want to be, and what's that gap, and how do we close that gap? And some of the nuance was, well, there are gaps, but then there's an infrastructure in place that we can leverage. So that was, again, part of the nuance. The needs, infrastructure needs, that relates to that ITS architecture that I showed, looking at, making sure that the devices, technologies match up well, and then looking at the systems and how they all match up together. Strategies and operations. Strategies, looking at what we can develop, but how we develop those strategies. Do we do it together? Do we do it separately? What can we learn from one another? Performance measurement, that is one that's critical. And this is one that I say a lot to my TSMO compadres, if you will, is this is great stuff. It sounds well. It sounds like we're going to do a lot, but it's got to work. It's got to work, or else we're losing credibility. And so while we want to advance technology and use information and connections and communication, it's all got to work. It's got to have some payback in order for us to continue to do this. Agency and organizational. I like to say that, Metro Plan Atlanta has a robust TSMO program. I think all the committees and the board know about TSMO and what it is. And we encourage our partners to do the same. But that's also developing the talent, because there is this wave of institutional knowledge that's moving out. And so we have to make sure that that workforce is going to be re-upped, if you will. We did have a tour at the Regional Transportation Management Center for the CAC. Did have a good turnout, but it gave everyone a chance to go behind the scenes and see how we use technology at a regional level. And what you saw at the TMC is at each county and at the city of Orlando. They all have the same thing. Strategies, we use FDOT, TISMO strategy guide to identify the strategies. We aligned them with the goals and looked at focus areas. What's needed? Is there a fiber connection needed along a corridor that doesn't already have that communication in place? And what is the purpose? Is it a safety, or is it just movement of cars, or is it pedestrian? So those are some of the ideas that we use in selecting these strategies. And then what is involved with implementation? We have established in the TISMO committee that TISMO strategies do not, or TISMO projects do not require right-of-way or limited right-of-way. That's something that we just don't want to have to compete with. So that's something that we also are considering as we look at these strategies. I mentioned that our ITS architecture, I took this out of the document. This is maintained by the department. It's updated as needed, but this is pretty much what it looks like. It goes through all these strategies, all these ideas, and what are the connections, what connections need to be in place, who's responsible, what are the responsible parties for making this particular strategy work. In terms of prioritization, this is the criteria that we developed. It shows the goals on the left, the criteria, and then the data source. If we're going to measure something, we need to have some information to measure it with, and then the points we are assigning. So we have safety, reliability, and performance, investment in economy. And in investment in economy, we look at the data source. You see CFMPOA. That's the Central Florida NPO Alliance. It's the NPOs in District 5. What we did for them, we developed a rubric on what a regional TISMO project is. So first we had to define it, and then we had to come up with a way to evaluate it. And what we did is we used the Strategic Intermodal System, SIS, which has separate funding. And the idea was, if we can identify these projects on the SIS, and it opens up funding. But it also meets one of the needs in that if you look at the TISMO projects amongst the NPOs in District 5, Metro Plan Orlando sucks the air out of the room because we have so many. But if we just look at the SIS, that reduces a lot of it. And it opens up opportunities for our other partners within the district. So moving on from that, the other goal is access and connectivity. And again, you see the criteria and how we're going to measure it. And then the last one is health and environment. The equity question that we had. This is where we want to make sure that in terms of equity, in terms of low income, Black, Brown communities, that we recognize that, but also do a little bit of outreach in terms of, if we put a camera or a device at an intersection, it's not there for surveillance, it's there for safety. And we want to make sure that you can get across that intersection. And we want to make sure that they're in the future with connected vehicles and with wearables. Everyone has a smartphone that you can download an app, and it allow you or alert you to an impending conflict with a vehicle. So that's why we're putting it there, not to watch you. That's a misnomer. I think that's something that we need to do a better job at informing those that are going to be impacted by these developments. Some nuance. When we started this work, it was about the technology, and our steering committee said, well, what about some of the other things, the low tech improvements that can be made at intersections where a lot of crashes and a lot of safety issues occur? So what we did is we kind of pivoted and we said, okay, we can look at 20 intersections to make improvements on. And we split it up based on the amount of traffic signals that each jurisdiction has. That's pretty much what we do with our traffic signal retiming program. We allocate resources based on the number of traffic signals. So you see those locations that we're going to be looking at. So the path forward, I mentioned earlier, while we want to follow and be consistent with the update of the MTP and look at quarters, we also want to look at leveraging existing deployment that we have. So we have that gap, but we want to close that gap. But where do we have opportunities to build on what's already there? So we want to leverage the investments, regional strategies. That goes to, again, that low tech, whether it's cybersecurity, sharing of data, performance measures. We want to look at regional strategies as well. And then other considerations, we have the active transportation plan, Central Florida Vision Zero effort. And both of those will go into the work that we will be doing with the MTP. So we want to be consistent, and we want to leverage those investments and close the gap, but do it so that what we recommend in our MTP, that we can take advantage of building on that technology. Because again, as Mr. O'Hanlon often reminds us, that everything's going to be automated. And in order for all that to happen, before all that happens, there's a lot of data that's floating around between the vehicles, between pedestrians, between bicyclists, and how can we capture that, use it, not only to evaluate how well we're doing or how bad we're doing, but how we can make everyone's travel much more safer and reliable. And then the last one, again, Mr. O'Hanlon reminds us, we don't know where we're going to be in 2030. But last Friday, I had one of probably my worst commutes. Coming from Tampa on I-4 was shut down. All the lanes were shut down. So, of course, technology told me how to get around it, and it did. Okay. But then on the way home, I'm an NPR supporter. I listen to NPR. There was a story about Sora, I think is how you pronounce it, S-O-R-A. It's an AI platform it's going to have a huge impact on visualization, filming, and photography. And so, being a curious guy that I am, later Friday night, I had nothing to do, kind of looked it up, came across this article, and I can, if anyone's interested, I can share it with you. But it's creating videos, and they're so real that, you would think a human did it. And all you have to do is just say, show me Bentley Peters flying in the air, and it will create it for you and make you think that it was really created, that it's really Bentley, excuse me, sorry, flying. So can we say, okay, tell us how to improve transportation within Central Florida? Show us, and it'll do it for you. And it'll animate it so it can tell you how it's going to look. Now, that's just me opining on this, but it's something that we have to consider. Something that certainly by 2050, it will have a larger role. So, Madam Vice Chairwoman, I kind of went off a little bit. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hill, for this wonderful presentation, for Mr. O'Hanlon, but for all of us. Thank you so much. Ms. Pizzo, I recognize you. That's why we gave it to you first. Go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm gonna talk fast. You're thinking 2050. I'm channeling Mr. O'Hanlon here. A simple Google search of worldwide, where are autonomous EV vehicles, buses, specifically Theo. China, as of 2017, has 421,000 buses on the road. Think about that, China. Okay, then let's go to Finland, Norway, and the Netherlands. Yeah, they're rocking it too.
Are you referring to automated
I'm
buses? or
talking
just
autonomous
autonomous
EV.
buses? Okay.
We've got the whole package here. So then I thought, well, let me Google, oops, hang on here. Let me Google the autonomous bus service. What was it, Scotland? Scotland back in 2023. Scotland has got us beat. We're behind the time here. And I agree with Theo. I'm a 14-year veteran of the DOT. I've lived in Central Florida most of my life, all but 3.5 years. And seeing the transportation issues, not just on I-4, but our local roads that could easily be resolved if we got on board and started being smart about our transportation. It doesn't have to be a bus that everybody climbs on and somebody's driving down the road and is spewing diesel fuel or whatever. We need to be smart about our transportation, and it's now. We are actually behind this. The United States as a whole, we're behind. There are a few communities, there are a few states, according to my Google, and y'all can Google it for yourself, that there are a few states that are on board to this, that are doing this. San Francisco, for instance, was one I saw popped up. We are such a huge community here with all the tourists that we have that come from all over the world. And the first comments I hear from them when I had recently traveled over to Europe a couple of years ago was, what's with your transportation system? We are so far behind, and it's not going to happen 2030 or 2050. It needs to be now because we are competing with the world. Thank you.
Ms. Beason. Mr. Pilgrim, you're recognized.
I don't,
think
that's
Oh,
gonna take
sorry.
all afternoon for us. to go
Sorry,
back
go
and
ahead,
forth.
Mr. Hill. Oh, yeah.
Could you?
Did you want to answer her first?
There's, the answer is just, there's,
I
yeah,
know, it was a
yeah.
statement.
but thank you for the comment.
Thank you so much. Mr. O'Hanlon, you're
I
recognized.
think,
That last slide, put a freaking little bullet for the robo buses that we're all gonna be using.
They're out there.
They're already out.
Google them.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pilgrim, you're recognized.
Eric, thank you for, Eric, thank you for your presentation. Could you please go back to the goals and objectives slide real quick? Probably have to go. Okay, that one. So, you mentioned two major key focuses, high tech and low tech. I would, based on your goals and objectives here, I would strenuously suggest there's a third criteria that is no tech. Meaning, and I'll give you an example. If we have a corridor that has elementary school, middle school, high school, shopping district, we could spend $20 million putting in a fiber network to get all the signals to talk to each other and work with the county to get, all right, the elementary school has to start at this point and the high school starts to start at this point. But there's the potential for a no-tech solution, which is we could spend $20 million doing this fiber network and trying to manage all the trips. Or there's a $10 million solution where every community within a half mile of that high school, middle school is given bicycle lanes that they don't currently have access to, and it eliminates the trips. Because now we're going to say, well, the county's not going to serve people within X number of feet of these bicycle lanes because the infrastructure is now available that wasn't before. So we've taken a $20 million problem that then the county has to maintain and replace over time, which is going to cost more, and spent half as much. And if you're able to offset the trips that require a bus to people biking or using micromobility, now the county doesn't have to get as many drivers. Now the county doesn't have to maintain as many buses. So I guess my concern is there's instances, and it's not everywhere, that we're using technology to chase a symptom. The problem is I don't have the infrastructure for me to bike my child to the elementary school nearby, so I have to take a car or I have to take a bus, which creates capacity constraints. So I would really, really, really ask that we have a third criteria, which is no tech, that we don't need physical technology to solve a movement problem.
That's a good point, and I agree, that it's not all about technology. I mean, many of you have heard me say I'm infatuated with technology, not in love with it. And I think that it's not the right answer for every challenge. And it goes back to my comment about we got to make sure that this works or we lose credibility. And so when we start looking at cars and we start looking at improvements, there's not always going to be a technology improvement in that car. It's going to be something else. And so I agree with your comment. I would like for it to stay under that low technology, if you will, with the footnote that it could be no technology too. Can we meet there?
Roundabout, no tech.
Okay, so, but can we meet there with it being a footnote on the low tech? No? Okay.
I guess I would say from a state and federal standpoint, does it open up different opportunities funding wise to say, this is just a physical capital investment, not a technological investment. And so by delineating, we're able to chase different grants that way.
Sure, no problem. Madam Chair, Vice Chairwoman, if I could just follow up on Ms. Pizzo's comment.
Yes.
That you have to look at the bigger picture and how these other countries, their government, the funding, how it works, the policies that are in place. That's international. Okay, you look at China. I mean, you do it this way or no way. In Europe, these are countries that were developed before the vehicle, before the cars. So they are able to build on transit and build on alternative modes. And then if you look within our country alone, yeah, I agree. There are some states that are ahead of us in terms of automation. There are some cities that are ahead of us. My son relocated to Phoenix in October. We took a road trip out there to move him out there. And the first thing that I saw were autonomous vehicles riding around. Okay, watched one. There was a Phoenix Suns game. We went, pedestrians everywhere. I watched as the vehicle went to make a right turn. A pedestrian came, it stopped and continued. So yeah, but a lot of that is still in the demonstration mode, because there still are some safety concerns and there still are some resistance. If you look at the way that some of the citizens of San Francisco have responded to autonomous vehicles by putting cones out so that the cars stop. I mean, so we still have a way to go. We'll get there eventually, but we still have, some things that we have to overcome.
Thank you.
And I just 2 seconds. I love it when people say Europe's transportation structure is so much older than ours. Yeah, it is. But they have made the changes. We're so much younger. Why can't we make the changes quicker? It's like people back in the day, oh no, you're never going to replace a horse and buggy. We're always going to have horses. Okay, how many horse and buggies do you see trotting down the road unless you're in an Amish area? You don't see them. So to say, folks in San Francisco, they don't like it. They put out the cones, they sabotage the future. And that's unfortunate because I think we need more education and we need to get on board. As Theo had pointed out, we hear this all the time ad nauseum. We have to make changes. Where is it? How does it start? Do we have to get the elected officials on board? Elect the individuals that are wanting to be progressive and make the change.
I agree,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Pizzo. Thank you
I
so
liked
much
your
for your comment.
presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. As to the auto buses to Mr. O'Hanlon, public health is to Venice. So I appreciate when I see the words public health in here because I sit on this board for a number of years because I love bringing the voice and the connection to transportation and health. When you're looking for grant funding, when you're looking for strategies, I'm going to share this one nugget. County health rankings and roadmaps, they have blogs and websites and evidence-based practices. One thing we care about is our health. Transportation, food, air, all that great stuff, exercising, riding your bike for recreation. Some people ride their bike to the doctors for transportation. Health is wealth. So while we're looking for grant funding, look in other areas such as public health. There's grants available, there are strategies that are already proven if you just take a look in our venue of county health rankings. When the nation ranks the healthiest counties, one plug for Seminole County, we remain at one of the healthiest counties in the state, top 5. But it's based on transportation, it's based on commuter ride, it's based on food insecurity, it's based on affordable housing. So I'm going to leave that with you, county health rankings and roadmaps. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. White. And we will end it with Mr. Vista.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the presentation and thank you for the comments from my colleagues. Just to kind of give a practical recommendations of what I think can be done immediately. There's something on the front end involving with urban planners. And, while we're reacting to some of these issues on the front end, as state, county or whatnot approves urban planning, could FDOT or Metro Plan establish a set of criteria of what needs to be met at the time of when urban plan is meeting? So we're not continuously creating these issues. So my interpretation of, I think what Ms. Pizzo and my colleague, Mr. Pigman, were covering, there's almost like the no tech option is a 5-minute neighborhood concept, which is kind of timeless. If geospatially you have employers, resources in a location that makes sense, then you kind of really reduce and curb. It's not necessarily eliminate the need for transportation, but we can really start to somewhat get some progress on some end in terms of the no tech. So if there is something that's being developed, any type of new development, I think using the argument of we don't have funding, we can use that as ammunition as to why urban planners need to follow this set of criteria because they're just creating a different issue. So whatever deficiencies we have, use that as ammunition as to why folks need to comply with transportation and criteria that you establish. So if there is existing criteria, could you share that? And maybe there's some feedback that members can provide on kind of making that more rigorous. Thank you.
Is that a comment or question?
Recommendation.
Oh, okay.
And the last item was, I guess there is a question, is there a set of criteria right now for urban planners coming from FDOT or Metro Plan?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay. I can follow up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I can follow up too and help you.
Thank you for your comment. I appreciate it. Mr. Hill, thank you for your presentation. We truly appreciate it. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you. There are several items under the general information at tab 9 on your agenda packets. Our next in-person CAC meeting will be April 24, 2024. The reminder of the meetings for the 2024 are listed on your agenda. Please remember that RSVPs are very important. The next Metro Plan Orlando Board meeting will be on March 13th. At this time, do any of the committee members want to make any final comments?
I'll be real brief. I have to say that this is one of the best meetings that we've had. And what we're seeing in this conversation that we've had is people that have specific hot buttons, like autonomous and yours with mass transit. And I really like seeing that because what it's doing is we're on a aircraft carrier and this thing can't turn fast. And the only way you get it to turn is if you have a little tugboat like an autonomous Mr. O'Hanlon over there pushing and, over here. So I think we just need to be more vocal in these meetings, not that they extend forever, but, just to get these ideas out there and continue talking about them. The other little story I want to give you is on AI that it's here. I'm a software developer. I develop software, and I will tell you from personal experience, this has dramatically changed my life. I used to write code and go out onto Google and look for examples, and it would take me hours. I'm talking hours. I tell ChatGPT, write me a program that does this, and it just spits it out, and I copy and paste it, and off it goes. So what you said, Mr. Hill, about asking it how to make the streets better is not 10 years from now. It is today, and it will dramatically change our lives in the next months. So just keep that in mind. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller. I recognize you, Mr. Pegram.
Thank you, Chair. Just following up on a previous comment I had and a request. Orlando International Airport for decades had used a certain percent per passenger that drives locally to the airport in order to plan the amount of parking that they needed. Post-COVID, that percentage went up exponentially, and so they've had capacity constraints with parking. They recently opened 2 more asphalt parking lots that they built as fast as they could, but now they've gotten into a whole new system of reservations. Instead of going into a garage, not finding a spot, and then having to drive to another one where it creates all these cycles and trips, they're now going to a reservation system because of their capacity constraints. I think I'd previously asked this year sometime if we could have someone from the Orlando airport come and talk about how the dynamics in transportation have changed there. Because I think if they continue to chase the parking problem, it doesn't necessarily solve the long-term solution that Sunrail could provide, where someone drives from DeBerry now and takes up a parking spot at the airport, versus if they're able to just hop on Sunrail, that opens up long-term capacity for the airport. So I think there's some synergy there between the airport and Sunrail that I'd just like to learn from the airport about post-COVID, what they've learned with Terminal C, and what they're doing looking forward now that dynamics have changed. And then my second thing real quick, this is for Ms. Webster. I hope this is good news for you. And this is somewhat tying into Tom's comments last meeting about dinosaur technology. So for those that may not understand, Brightline, while privately funded, used private activity bonds in order to build it, which means they're getting bonds to build the infrastructure, then they're paying back the bond. Because of using that, they have to publicly disclose to the bondholder every month what their ridership and revenues and everything were. So for the month of January, last month, from MCO or to MCO, Brightline carried an average of 4,000 passengers per day. So here's the thing. Delta, Spirit, and Southwest, on average, every day have 15 flights to South Florida from OIA. Combined, they cannot provide the number of seats that Brightline currently does. And that's with Brightline at 40% capacity. They have built their trains to be 10 cars long, and right now they're only 4 cars long. So they have orders with Siemens in California to add, I think, a 5th coach by the end of this year. So that's a 25% increase, and then more coaches in coming years because it takes years to build these things. So, yeah, to your comment about prices, the challenge they're dealing with, and you can find this kind of anecdotally from the ridership data, they're having to manipulate the tickets in South Florida for people that go locally, that they live in West Palm and they commute to Miami. When you go on the app, they're having to tell people, well, that seat's not open, even though it is, because they're trying to make sure someone from Orlando gets the ticket. So they have an overwhelming demand compared to the capacity they can provide, and they're having to manipulate it via their app. So when we talk about dinosaur technology, I think you could say the argument is the airplane is now the dinosaur technology. So anyway, Ms. Webster, wanted to let you know that we've kind of passed that Rubicon. So it would be interesting to see how the airlines respond with their scheduling and things. So
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Pegram. And Ms. White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for sharing in our package the solicitation of agencies to host interns from the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials. I hope that Metro Plan Orlando is considering internship placement for careers in transportation for youth. If there are any other agencies that are considering that, please reach out to me. I would love to input a little bit about transportation and the impact on health if you should decide to have a youth at your site. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Mr. O'Hanlon, I just want to say personally, I thank you for all the, information that you bring to this board. Because you've actually enlightened me on so many things with autonomous driving, and I look at it so differently because of you. So thank you for that. Okay. We have now come to the second public comment period. If any members of the public wish to comment and are joining us virtually, please use the raise hand function and you will be recognized, or dial 9 on your phone keypad. We'll send you a prompt to unmute your mic. After you are recognized, please state your name and address for the record and limit your comment to 2 minutes, please. Do we have anyone joining us virtually who would like to make a comment, Lisa?
Madam Chair, we do not have any hands raised on the virtual side.
Thank you so much. Do we have any members in public attending in person who wish to make a public comment?
Madam Vice Chair, I've received no requests.
Thank you so much. At this time, if there are no further businesses, our meeting is adjourned. And the time is
11:35.
11:35. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a blessed day.
Good job. You landed on time. Well, I'm so sorry I messed up those times.
I was like, I can't be looking for this. My mother would kill me.
No,